but then they have a little less integrity and start to.
Yeah, he's going to do a soft talk.
Yeah.
You need to adjust.
Not too worried. I was listening to it isolated before, and even with all the sound in the house, it's pretty. That's a way to get people's attention.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening. Hello and welcome to the Explorers Club. I'm Richard Garriott. I'm the current serving president of the Explorers Club. I'm just finishing my 4th year as president when the term limit is 3 years. They actually changed the bylaws so they could keep me on for another year, and now I think they regret it. And a new president has just been voted in who will take over in April, so I'm the kind of the lame duck president. But for those of you who have not been here to the Explorers Club before, this is a place that a lot of us who call ourselves members here, as Peter is one of our newer members, we consider this place sort of Hogwarts for adults. It is really a magical place. If you haven't taken the time to explore and look around, do so before you leave the building. Back in 1904, when we were formed about 120 years ago, it was a time that there were still literally dragons drawn on a lot of the maps of the Earth. And so for for the first 50 years, a lot of our members were pushing those dragons off the maps and planting flags in some of those places that had never been reached, often risking and losing life and limb. In fact, the bell that Peter rung just outside to bring you in was part of our first president's early expeditions, where 20 out of 26 crew that went with him into the Arctic died after being stuck there for 3 years with cannibalism and other kind of interesting tales. Kind of the next 50 years of this club was really the age of scientific field work. And in fact, we are still fundamentally a fellowship of professional scientific field explorers. But still plenty of flags to be planted. And I would say in this last 20 years, the modern era, there's still flags. There's still a lot of places that have never been reached, lots of space, lots of caves, lots of the oceans still left to explore, lots of places to go back to with new technology to explore. But now, you know, one of the things I'm most proud of is when you see our members out there doing field work, they're usually not just bringing back data, they're also bringing back or actually implementing solutions. Solutions to the grandest problems that face humanity and the planet these days. You know, our people are out there really making a difference, and that's one of the things I'm the most proud of. And you'll see that story writ large in the entryway with our famous firsts. Our members were the first people to go to the North Pole, South Pole, top of Everest, bottom of the deepest place in the ocean, surface of the moon. And in the members' lounge, you'll see more artifacts of what explorers are doing today. Now, you know, tonight you really do have a very special evening. This is something we've not done much, if ever. And so I'm very excited to have you all here tonight. So I'm going to pass back over to Randy Cohen, who is the host, that, as you all know well, the podcast Person, Place, a Thing. And he'll be speaking tonight with Peter Fong, who is, as I mentioned, member international of this year, 24, or last year, I guess it is now. But anyway, welcome to you both, and thank you so much for coming here to our Explorers Club to have this evening.
Thank you, Richard. It's fantastic. I've never been here before, and my friend Belinda was saying it's Wes Anderson, I think, designed this place. Is that right? Just a quick word about the format we used tonight. I think people are especially interesting when they don't speak directly about themselves, but about something they care about. So this evening, Peter will talk about one person, one place, and one thing that are meaningful to him. And because otherwise I'd have to change our stationery. And it's, what else? Oh, we're recording for broadcast, so the no cursing rule is in effect. I'm sick about it, but soon we won't have, I guess we won't have an FCC. Or the World Health Organization, or I don't know, civilization. So the Explorers Club will be even more relevant as we descend into some kind of barbaric society. Something for us all to look forward to. What else? Oh, we're fundamentally a radio show, which means from time to time I'll say something even more inane than this. I'll say, we'll be right back. And when I do, I would be insanely grateful if you would applaud like lunatics. The good news is you don't have to mean it. It can be that kind of fake applause, that sarcastic applause that means, oh, he's such a jerk. Because on radio, that sounds just like sincere applause. Science is baffled. What else? Oh, we're a radio show with the emphasis on show. And to me, that means there should always be live music, and I'm delighted that this evening that music will be provided by Baagii Chogsom, who's apparently not shown up. No, he's here. Thank you, man. I know you've spent time in Mongolia, and I guess you recognize that song right away.
Actually, I have. It's about a horse.
Do you really know that? Can you swing that just a little closer?
A little closer? Yeah.
Better? Okay. Nice work on the bell, by the way.
Thank you. That was an honor, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I was expecting it not to be as loud as it was.
I was the backup. They said, do you want to ring the bell? And I said, well, it should be you because you're the guest. And I was secretly hoping you would decline. So I already resent you a little bit, Peter. Who's your person?
My person is a native New Yorker named Perry McDonough Collins. He was named after Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry, who won the Battle of Lake Erie. He was born in 1813. And I don't think he set out to be an explorer, but it just happened to him.
He set out, I think, to be an incompetent lawyer, right?
That's right. He was excited by the gold rush. He went to San Francisco. He had 7 cases. He lost 6, and he won 1 by default.
You know, if only he were alive today, I think there would be a Supreme Court seat in his future. There are people who seem to like incompetent lawyers. But he didn't stay in San Francisco.
No, he didn't stay in San Francisco. In 1856, when Franklin Pierce was the president, he got a letter appointing him a consul to Russia, and he had this idea, and this was a time before the U.S. owned Alaska, and even some colonies down into Northern California. That part of the world was called Russian America, and Russia and the United States were friendly, and China was a backward place that could be exploited. So he wanted to go. He had this idea that this great river in Russia, the Amur River, could become a highway of commerce with a new invention called the steamship.
I've heard of this. So this is a trade scheme ultimately.
Yeah, whenever he came down a river, and I mean, I didn't choose Perry Collins as my person because I feel some kinship with him. I mean, anytime he saw a beautiful place, he thought about it, how it could be plowed under and turned into fields, or what could be mined, or he was always looking to extract something from the land. I mean, this is the time of manifest destiny. Whereas when I go down the river, I always think, oh my God, I hope the gold miners don't see this place. But still, for all that, he was open-hearted, and when he met people, you know, all these different tribes in Siberia, he met them with an open heart, which I think, in our travels around the world, my wife and I have lived in a lot of places, and whenever we meet Americans over there, I'm always impressed by how open-hearted and generous Americans are when they're traveling.
But when you're back here, do you have some other impression? Is that what you're saying?
I'm also a native New Yorker, so I can't say anything bad
about this city. But the nice ones leave, I think is what you're saying.
We have that instinct, yes.
All right. This is all on the Amur River, right?
Right, which is not the river that I went down on my expedition, but there is a town where we cross paths. The town is called Kyakhta. It's on the border between Russia and Mongolia.
And say a little about how this turned into a scheme to build a telegraph.
Okay, so yeah, you have to think this is 1856, 1857. There's no communication between Europe and the United States. They've been trying to lay a transatlantic cable from Nova Scotia to someplace in the UK, I can't remember where, and they're failing over and over. So he has this idea, after having been down the Amur in Russia, that it would be easier to go across British Columbia, across Alaska, then the Bering Strait is very short, and then over land through Russia to Moscow. And Western Union backed this to the tune of several $1 million, which was a lot of money in those days. And unfortunately, the other group won. They figured out the problems with laying that transatlantic cable, and so the scheme fell apart.
It's easy now to think, oh yeah, that's a great way to connect New York to London. Let's go by way of Shanghai. That it seems nuts, but it wasn't really, was it?
No, because it's really hard to lay a cable in the sea, and so they thought, well, land is going to be the easier way.
And is it fair to say all that he was doing is very much in the spirit of Manifest Destiny? There are all these new lands, let's go out there and exploit them.
And he felt like Imperial Russia was following the model of the United States. I mean, there'd been the Gadsden Purchase, the Louisiana Purchase. We had traveled, Americans had traveled west, taking land away from native people. But you think when he went to Russia, that's 1856. The Washburn expedition hadn't been to Yellowstone yet. That was 1870. So it's a really different time. But he saw the Russians coming east from Moscow. They didn't make it to Lake Baikal until 1820, something like that.
Who they? You mean?
I mean white Russians. There were Buryats there, of course.
There were people living
because
right.
that's their country. It's been their lands for thousands of years, but.
So this is, it's not exactly an expression of colonialism. No one wants to stay and build a town there and settle there. They want to mine something or...
Oh, actually, they did want to build towns too, and
Did
they were already doing that, competing. Actually, the Chinese were doing the same. The Chinese were coming north and building towns, and the Russians were coming down the river, and they had this sort of uneasy alliance. In some places, both the Russians and the Chinese had outposts on the same bank of the Amur, so they weren't even using the river as a border.
But were the towns meant to be just outposts for trade or for construction, as opposed to? I guess I'm looking at the difference between how North America was colonized and how the Spanish colonized.
They wanted
South
settlers,
but they did.
Yeah, and it wasn't always settlers. I mean, the Tsars used that whole Baikal area like as an early gulag. That's where they sent the Decembrists, that group that was inspired by the American Revolution to overthrow the Tsar. When that revolution failed, the Decembrists were sent to the Baikal region. And I can't remember how it goes in Russian, but there's a saying like, there's no one as loyal or as faithful as a Decembrist wife, because the men were exiled and the women didn't have to follow them, but they did.
They did. But again, this growth in sort of prisons seems very contemporary. This is Perry Collinsfield. I think he would do really well in our forthcoming time.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could have gotten a similar letter.
Yeah, it seems like he would fit right in. This is so. But was he well known at the time when he had this scheme, this grand scheme to build this telegraph?
But I think he was. I think it captured the American imagination in a way that, not necessarily going to the moon, but building a telegraph line across the country would have been like building the railroad. You can think about it. It took 2 weeks for a message to get to London from New York. It would have to go by ship. And you couldn't just pick up your phone and...
No, it seems a grand and noble enterprise. It seems well worth doing and imaginative in his approach.
Yeah, and I think that's...
How did he take the failure?
I think he took it... I mean, I don't know much about his life after that, but he seemed to... He had shares in that company, and even after the venture was abandoned, he made out okay.
Well, that's disheartening.
Yeah, so I think he ended up spending like the last 20 years of his life living in this downtown in the St. Denis Hotel. Apparently gave up exploring and gave up commercial ventures. As far as I know, never married. I think left all of his money to his niece, who then gave it to a university, something like that.
I'm sure you're going to say like a home for wayward cats or something. He just squandered in some way. But where did this? What do you mean all his money? If his enterprises all failed, where did this money come from?
Well, that you're asking you're asking the wrong person. I know nothing about how to make money. But he somehow I mean, as I understood, he was a lawyer, even if he was a failed lawyer. He somehow managed to hold on to these shares, and maybe he sold a few before it went under.
Is there a plaque, by the way, downtown where he lived? There's not.
I don't know. I haven't gone down.
We're an underplaqued city, in my opinion, and we need more.
That St. Dennis Hotel is gone. I can't remember what they turned it into, but it's. I think it was raised. On this site, it was raised in the 70s, something like that. It was still there until recently. I mean, New York has a lot of history like that.
Would you? He wrote about this.
Yeah, he wrote about
this. A best-selling book, I bet. Maybe that's how he made all his.
This was a reissue from the University of Wisconsin, I think. But I think at the time it did sell a little bit.
Say the name of it.
It's called. Well, the original book was called Voyage Down the Amoor, with Amoor, A-M-O-O-R. But that's not the generally accepted spelling now. It's A-M-U-R. So now, and his editor retitled it Siberian Journey Down the Amoor to the Pacific. So
that's a pretty good title.
Yeah, it's
that editor earned the money.
He earned his keep. Yeah.
So this is Perry Collins' words now.
Yes, this is Perry Collins' words, and he was not only writing this book, but he was also sending like diplomatic they're not telegraphs. He was actually writing because the telegraph hadn't been laid yet.
Pretty ironic. He could send a diplomatic telegram.
But he was really a man ahead of his time. Yeah. But he was writing these messages back to the Secretary of Commerce, because this was all about commerce. But I want to read this passage because it shows how adventurous he was. I mean, at this scene, he's in this town called Kyakhta, which I have also visited. It's much different now, of course. And the locals are just treating them to more wine and food that they can consume. They're all completely drunk. And then the host decided to play a little game with the guests, in which you grab the guests, unbeknownst to them, and start throwing them up toward the ceiling in a room with a ceiling like this. So during the performance, I stood half aghast, looking at the figure Peyton was cutting, a man 6 feet high and well-proportioned, going up and down like a trap ball, his coattail flying sky high, and his face as red as a brick. I was all the time consoling myself that they had administered this extra touch of hospitality to Peyton because they considered him the most worthy and the best able to stand it. And I said to Bitsov, I hope one tossing for the American nation will be considered honor enough. He replied, your turn will very likely come too.
That's great. Well, we're not going to get a better ending than that. Let's take a moment and we'll be right back. So, where's your place?
My place is a mountain in northern Mongolia, the Ulan Taiga, strictly protected area. It's called Mount Belcher, and that mountain is the origin of 5 large rivers, but 2 rivers that are not only great rivers in the sense of they're unique on the planet, but rivers that are very important to me because I love them. And Belcher, it's funny, Belcher in Mongolian means like a junction or a node. It's a place where things can come together or split apart. And it's a very apt name for this particular mountain.
It has a whole other meaning in English, you know. Belcher. You know, I'm at like, it's like a 12-year-old's remark. But why do you love this place, Peter?
I started working in Mongolia almost 20 years ago now, and when I went there, I had this plan that I was writing magazine stories. I was going to go there for a week, write a story, come back, and that would be it. I would go on to some other place. But I got there and I realized this is a place I have to come back to every year. This is a place that I hate to have to invoke like transmigration of souls, but when I got there, I really felt at home. I felt like there's not many other places that I feel like that. I mean, in Yellowstone, in Montana, but when I got to Mongolia, I looked out at the landscape. I mean, I think it must be like when you go to the Serengeti or someplace like that, some old place where humans have a long history.
So you went there initially just to write one magazine piece?
That was the original plan.
You had no idea of building a telegraph set, but it was as a journalist. I was writing travel stories for the New York Times and other places, fishing magazines, because I'm also a fly fisherman. And that turned out that in this place, there's one of the most beautiful fish in the world, too. And I immediately became enamored of them as well. Yeah. Were you the first fly fisher on?
I don't think I've been the first of anything.
It's asking. Probably not in this place either.
No, but I'm always glad to follow. Yeah.
When you described it as a protected area, protected for ecological reasons or military reasons?
No, Mongolia, they have a very ambitious program right now to protect 30% of the country by 2030. And they're well on their way there. I think they're up to 27% now. And the Nature Conservancy has just signed an agreement with the Mongolian government to try to get them over the hump and to get them to meet that target. And if you can imagine that in the United States, can you imagine 30% of the country with some kind of environmental protection? That would be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it could happen, now.
Right, now's our chance.
Yeah. We've lost our chance. And am I right that these rivers, a lot of this water drains into Lake Baikal?
And it's funny how it goes there. So actually, all the rivers that leave the mountain eventually go to Baikal. Well, they don't go to Baikal. They eventually go to the Arctic Ocean. They eventually end up in the same river, even though at some point the 2 branches of the river are separated by 2,000 miles. So on my expedition, I took one branch, the branch that goes to Baikal, and then that river is called the Seleng. In Russia, they call it the Selenga.
And this is the expedition that you wrote about in your book?
Yes, yeah.
Will you autograph books later?
I would be honored to autograph books,
Just so people know. I just thought, since you mentioned it.
Perry Collins would have plugged his book, I'm sure.
Yeah, he would have. I'm a little disappointed that you don't have a book right here. When you planned this expedition, what did you hope to accomplish, or what was your design?
We had all of these grand plans to attract media attention to the fact that the river was threatened by multiple dam projects and water diversions. And this river supplies more than half the fresh water to Lake Baikal. So without this river, the ecosystem in Baikal, which is strange and unusual and unique on the planet. There are freshwater seals, there's freshwater sponges, there's shrimp. There's a fish that's almost entirely composed of oil that lives in deep water and then rises up to feed at night. And they're so oily, you can dry them out and light them like a candle. So Baikal is unique on the planet. If it lost its main source of fresh water, it's not like it would dry up because it's a mile deep. It's 20% of the fresh water on the planet's surface. It's more water than all the Great Lakes combined. So it would take a few years to dry up if the river didn't supply it. But the ecosystem would change. All the animals that live there, the fish, the shrimp, even the algae, they're used to a regime where lots of water comes in the summer and less water in the winter. But if they build a dam, of course, that regime would change.
Are these dams planned for hydroelectric dams, or they're flood control dams? Why
It's
are
not
they?
flood control. Hydropower is one thing. Mongolia is almost all coal-fired power plants, so they need to diversify, and that's a noble ambition. But the other projects were to divert water to mining projects in the south. A lot of the big mines in Mongolia are in the Gobi, and there's not water available. But those big mines need water.
I wanted to just mention my favorite Lake Baikal story. I know we all have our own favorite Lake Baikal story, but so it's the winter of 1920, and this is, I'm referring to the, like I have to tell the people in this room, the Great Siberian Ice March. Do you know all about this?
I don't know.
Oh, well, I'll just take a quick moment. So retreating, it's 1920, right? And it's the Revolutionary Wars are still going on. The retreating White Army crosses frozen Lake Baikal. And the wind was so fierce that members of this army were frozen in place into the lake. Ooh, that's all I got. That's a big thing.
That's enough.
They died, and they didn't get them out till the spring thaw. Pretty cool, right?
That is cool.
That's going to be in the movie.
I'm surprised no one told me that when I was there.
I'm surprised no one told you that when you were there. Well, no one from the White Army would tell you because that's like, they didn't do so well. And people get really embarrassed by their
true.
failures.
Yeah.
And so that's probably why you didn't hear about it. Hey, since Lake Baikal it's vast, it's a mile deep, it's fresh water, is there an ice skating culture?
I was there in October when it was snowing and not yet frozen, but I think not only is there ice skating, there's ice boating, and the ice can be a meter thick, so you can drive happily on it.
Yeah, you could drive on it.
Yeah, people sled across, and and usually there's no snow when the ice freezes, so the ice freezes clear like glass. People told me that you can walk across the ice, it's clear. The water in Baikal itself is also very clear. You can see 100 feet down easily, and you have this very disorienting feeling that you're not walking on a solid surface.
Oh, I won't even go in, the thing over in Hudson Yards, you can stand on a big piece of glass 50 stories up. I'm not doing that. So I'm not walking out on Lake Baikal, especially after what happened to the White Army. Is there a difference between exploring and traveling?
There must be, but I'm not sure I could put my finger on it. I think for me, traveling is when someone else is going to take care of you being warm and dry, and when you're exploring, that's your own responsibility.
That's a pretty good distinction. But you also had, I'd add maybe, you were traveling with a real purpose.
Yeah, a vague purpose, but we didn't know what we would find. That was part of the whole reason going. There's very little basic science that's been done in this drainage, so we wanted to do some of that. We knew where we were going, but we didn't know how to get there. I had talked to another scientist who had gone on a different route, and he said, make sure you have very detailed maps. But we didn't.
Where would you get them? So, and why did you not have the very detailed map?
Because I wasn't able to. I'm not sure where I could have found them in Russia, but I would have had to gone to Russia to get those maps. Yeah, they're not.
No maps for you.
No, no maps for us. I mean, the CIA maybe, if I had had a friend.
So it's not that this area is unmapped. It's that
Oh no, it's a place. I mean, during the Soviet era, it was a busy place, and even before, at the time that Perry Collins went down, he went down this same river in the winter with a sledge, and he remarked on how prosperous the farms looked and the number of animals in the fields, and I think it was like that into the 1900s, and then of course when there were collective farms, there were even more animals. But when I went down in 2018, after the fall of the Soviet Union, a lot of those farms, which weren't really sustainable economically, had been abandoned. And local people were relying on imported drumsticks from the United States, which they called bush legs.
So there was no, then it was no longer a functioning agrarian society. And
No,
how did people live?
There were poachers, people who netted fish. So we tried to meet and talk to a couple of them, but there were a lot of also Russian patrols going up and down the river with automatic weapons trying to stop the poachers from fishing. Besides the taimen, which is the fish we catch in Mongolia, is in the trout family, there's another fish called the omul, which is like a whitefish, so the same whitefish we would find in the deli here. Only these whitefish are really highly sought after and very beautiful. And it's the most popular food fish in that part of Russia. And the population, just before we went in 2015, had crashed. And so they banned fishing for 3 years, and they were trying to see if they were going to come back.
So the Russian patrols are because of overfishing.
One set of patrols were. Yeah.
What was the other one?
The other ones we don't know. Yeah. we tried to pretend we were tourists because there was some tension between our government and their government at that point, and some of the Russian scientists said, "Well, we can't risk working with you because if we do, we'll get accused of taking money from foreign sources, and they'll shut us down. Like they'll shut down our research projects. They'll label us, a foreign entity." So we thought, we're going to join. There's a big anti-dam movement in Russia too, and so we thought, we're going to join this movement, and we'll have the TV cameras on us. And then it turned out we just had to kind of slink around like muskrats.
The muskrat, by the way, known for its slinking.
And an invasive species in Russia there, because that's a North American species.
Oh, how did the muskrat get to?
Someone thought, the minks are there too, because someone thought it would be fun to farm them and harvest the fur.
Oh, brilliant.
But instead they got loose, and now they've become a problem. Yeah.
Oh, they're like the cane toads in Australia. Or,
exactly, or
other famous what?
Yeah, rainbow trout anywhere else.
Is a rainbow trout an invasive species?
If you're not from Colorado.
Really? That's the only, that's its...
Well, and California. It's a Western North American fish.
And it's a terrible thing if I have a rainbow trout like in my bathtub. I mean, but no, you wouldn't want a rainbow trout in the Hudson.
It wouldn't survive in the Hudson, but but there's plenty of rainbows in New York State.
Pirates?
Or maybe because of striped bass.
Striped bass? When you went somewhere, well, since your plan was to bring attention to this place, and then your media tactic, I believe, was slinking, that seems unlikely to bring attention. Did you feel that you hadn't achieved that goal?
No, and probably a good thing that I didn't. I mean, the book is there, and of course, and whatever happens with blog posts and websites these days, I don't know. But if I agitated too much in favor of this river, or to try to stop the dams, probably I would never be allowed back in Mongolia, because that's what's happened to most of the people who've been agitating against the dam. And for me, it's not a knee-jerk reaction that I hate all dams, or I don't believe that Mongolians have the right to determine what they do with their own natural resources and what they want to do, to diversify their energy portfolio. But I think we should talk about it and And there are people in Mongolia who agree that this is something that we should look at and see if there are other alternatives before we build that billion-dollar concrete structure that will block the river, destroy the ecosystem downstream, and saddle the government with a debt that they can't repay.
Wow. Well, I'm canceling my damn project. So I can tell you now, let's take a moment and we'll be right back.
Too far down. Sorry.
I did want to mention that we will edit a version of this for radio, and that'll air in about 6 weeks. Tomorrow, we're doing our next show is tomorrow. That's bad planning. Why did that happen? But it's it's a good one. Not that this isn't a good one. It's Zalman Mlotek and Steven Skybo. Those are the guys who did the Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof. Salman was a music director. Steven played Tevye. We're doing that down at Evo. Then we're doing Nancy Cantor the following week, the new president of Hunter. This is a lot to keep track of. If only someone would send you like an email. Well, we have a clipboard. We're not afraid to use it. If you'd like to just get an update about when these things are going to happen, just give us your email address, and we'll add you to our little list. And we won't send you any porn, unless you want porn. In which case, just put a little P by your name, and we'll see what we can do. What's your thing?
My thing, my thing is kind of hard to describe. It's a wooden sculpture, and I think we have an image of it that we can put briefly up on the screen. But my thing, his name is the Lord of the Territory, and I only know his name because it was written on a plaque in the Museum of Buryat History in Ulan-Ude in Russia. But when I walked into this museum, there was nobody else there. And the curator was chasing me around trying to get me to leave because I think she wanted to go to lunch. But this sculptor, and actually I talked to this, to my memory of this. I don't like to call him a thing. To me, he's a person, and actually he's probably more than a person. He was called the Lord of the Territory, which means he was likely a god who inhabited this wooden sculpture. And I definitely don't understand shamanism, but some of my coworkers are shamans, and I've drunk some vodka with shamans, and the idea that...
Wait a minute, some of your coworkers are shaman. Coworkers
in
where?
In Mongolia.
Oh, in Mongolia. It's not like you're working
so when
for
I'm,
the
yeah,
MTA.
Like when I'm not at the Explorers Club,
I see.
I'm often working in Mongolia as a fly fishing guide. But anyway, the Lord of the Territory, he's from the late 19th century. I asked a lot of experts in Buryatology if they knew anything about this particular object. All they knew was he was confiscated from whoever his rightful person was during the Soviet era because of course, shamanism and all religions were banned. And a lot of objects like this were burned, but some people managed to save them in the collection of this museum. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, they brought them out and put them on display. So the plaque for him says Exhibit 1, the Lord of the Territory.
What was the territory?
The territory is the territory around Lake Baikal, the Salanga River and Lake Baikal.
And did this object or similar objects have particular dominions, particular powers, responsibilities? Did it have a job description?
I'm sure he did. There was no description there, but when you go over that landscape, there are places that have where the other world is closer to the surface, or it's more permeable. A lot of times you'll see them decorated with prayer flags or ovos, which is the sort of shrine in Mongolian culture. It's kind of a combination of Buddhism and shamanism, but still it's a way to honor and respect a place. So yeah, I'm sure he had a very important purpose, and I don't know what it was. And when I saw him, the look on his face just. It seemed to be surprised, like, why am I here? And why has everyone forgotten how important I should be or how vital I should be to this landscape? Because I have to say, when I go down the river, I don't think of the river, when I say I love the river, I don't mean it like, oh, I love my pillow. I mean, to me, the river is like a god. I mean, a god that I can be in conversation with. And I feel like it's alive. And I don't always understand it, but I don't understand God either. And it's not just the river. There are places, there's trees. I talk to chickadees and I talk to chipmunks. But maybe that's just me.
No, it's not just you. It seems like something very human that people have been doing for all of human
I think it
history.
is human, especially when you move across the landscape at a human speed, not in a car, not behind a window, not with the air conditioning on. When you're rowing down the river and listening to the birds and the wind is blowing you back upstream faster than you can push the boat downstream, you kind of have a different relationship to the river. Yeah.
But the lord of the territory didn't get ousted just by the Soviets. Hadn't he lost his authority as Buddhism superseded shamanism?
No, strangely not.
No, he hung on?
Yeah, in most of Mongolia, and I think in Buryatia too, there was a sort of synthesis between Buddhism and shamanism. And so the lord of the territory might have just been integrated into, well, I mean, Buddhism has a lot of iconography and symbolism and sacred objects as well in the Mongolian version. Yeah.
Oh, I guess that's the same with many religions as they spread around the world. Incorporate elements in the religions they see, but like Christianity in Latin America, say.
Yes.
There will be aspects of pre-Christian faiths. Or Christianity in Haiti.
Easter eggs.
Easter eggs. There you go.
Yeah.
And today, today I guess it's Tibetan Buddhism is the dominant faith in that region.
Yeah, it came from Tibet, but I don't think that Mongolians wouldn't call it Tibetan Buddhism. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right. Would they call it Mongolian Buddhism? Or just Buddhism?
Just Buddhism.
Just Buddhism. Yeah, we all do that.
Yeah.
These are very remote places from my parochial, provincial New York City perspective. But when you travel to these places now, they must be more open to New Yorkers than they were when you were a kid. Is that
I don't know if I would say more open. I mean, Mongolians especially, the culture of hospitality is very ingrained. I mean, when we were first looking for places to bring tourists, because of course, if I'm a guide, I need guests, and we would just go out and drive around and look at the river, try to figure out where we would put a camp. Often we would break down.
Well, that's not going to attract a lot.
No,
of
but
guests.
we would find a ger, which are these tents, round tents made of wooden frame with felt and canvas on the top. You walk up to the ger. Usually there's a mean dog, and you have to yell, "Tie up your dog." And it doesn't matter what time it is, day or night. The people will wake up, come out. It could be pouring rain. They'll pull you inside, get you to take your clothes off, and stoke the fire, give you something hot to eat and drink. And it might be an hour before they ask you, "So, did you need any help?" But then, we need a part for the car. Well, you're not going to find it now. Sleep here, have breakfast with us, and then we'll go look for it in the morning. And I don't think, that hasn't changed in the 20 years that I've been working there. People in the countryside are still very welcoming of strangers. They won't go out of their way necessarily to introduce themselves, but if you need something, they'll be there. Yeah.
Will your enterprise of bringing more people in undermine the very thing that makes it so special to you? You're keeping the numbers down.
Yeah, our enterprise certainly won't, because we're talking 200 guests a year.
Yeah.
So
that seems sustainable.
And that's over about 300 miles of river. So we're not necessarily trying to turn this into mass tourism. What we're trying to do is focus attention on the river and give local people jobs in a way that sustains the river and the local people. So it's not an extractive industry. And that's funny to say that about tourism, but it feels like it's becoming that more and more.
How
that
do you
people,
mean that?
well, like say Barcelona or Venice.
Oh.
And I don't know what they're mining, Instagram photos, I guess. But
Right, but they've actually taken legal measures to limit the number of people.
Yeah, because somehow that's diminishing the place. And I have to say, if I felt like the work I was doing in Mongolia was diminishing the place, I would have to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
there seems to be the idea of more people coming to a place that you cherish is good in that it increases understanding, it increases knowledge, it shares the joy you find in the place. But at a certain point, it turns really ugly.
It can, yeah.
But you're keeping the numbers down.
Well, I mean, the people who want to go to Mongolia, that's a self-selecting group, right?
For the people who come there, would this, again, maybe I'm making too much out of I'm being too literal about the Explorers Club. This isn't really, it's not exploring, it's something else, something wonderful, though.
No, that's right. I mean, the people who come with me to Mongolia, they don't have to worry about staying warm and dry. we will keep them warm and dry. It's for...
Yeah, until that car breaks down again.
I don't know, Peter. Yeah, you're having a vacation, yeah.
Yeah. What, the old gods that you were describing, that look of surprise, like, hey, I used to run the joint. Do you think something similar happened, like to all the Greek gods, and then to all the Roman gods? Like, the statues of Athena, there's plenty of statues of Athena, but how many of us really sacrifice to Athena these days? I'm guessing very few. Does it seem similar to you?
Well, it's funny because during the expedition, we pulled into the biggest city on the river. It's called Ulan-Ude, and we got there right at sunset. And one of the Russian guys who was on the expedition, he's from that city, and he said, "You know what? We can't." Before we would just leave anchor the boats on the side of the river, and then set up tents. And he said, "No, we can't do that. That wouldn't be safe here. But we need to leave. We'll get a truck with a crane, pick the boats up, put them on the crane, drive them away, and go stay in a hotel." But when we pulled up to the riverbank, there was a group of shamans there having a ceremony. We didn't notice them at first because we were involved in our own things. But then they saw us and called us over. They were doing the ritual with vodka, and we all drank with them. And then, okay, pause for a second. They said, we have to do something. And a woman, a female shaman, picked up one of the most beautiful objects I've ever seen. And I was so shocked I didn't get out any of the multiple cameras I had. But it was about the size and shape of a box kite, a wooden frame. And every one of that wooden lattice work were all tied with beautiful ribbons and foil of different colors. And I thought, what is she going to do with that? She picked it up, she walked down to the river, and she put it on this is sunset. She put it on the river and it floated away. It was one of the most beautiful things I've seen, and I thought it was going to sink, but it didn't. It stayed on the top, and it didn't have a bottom. It was like it was levitating. The river surface was perfectly calm, and it just disappeared. And then they came back and said, "Are you guys going to stay here for a little while?" And we said, "Yeah," because we were waiting for our truck. And they said, "Okay, great, because we have another appointment and we have to go."
And what did they want you to do there?
Another part of the ritual involves fire, but apparently you're not allowed to put out the fire. You just have to let the fire burn out by itself. And of course, this is a dry time of year. It was in October.
Oh, so they wanted you to stay.
So they wanted to stay and watch the fire. So we just sat around and watched and waited for the embers to die away before we left.
Again, you brought us to such a nice sense of conclusion. You'll take some questions from the audience?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. Thank you.
Before we do, join me in thanking Baagii Chogsom and especially Peter Fong. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. That was fun.
Questions? No one ever wants to ask the first question, and everyone wants to ask the third question. Yes.
How tall is the guy in Tyr?
The Lord of the Territory, he's about up to my thigh. So he's big. Yeah, I mean, you can see that's a shaman's costume that was also in the display case next to him. And the shaman's costume is up on a little pedestal. So he's tall. And usually these figures are much smaller. So that's why this one is so unusual. Usually there's something the shaman can hold in his hand, like the size of a doll.
And you don't have any idea who originally owned it, or?
No, we were unable to find out any of that. I even wrote the director of the museum, but the people who originally saved the object, that would have been in the 50s. So those people are gone.
Yes.
If you were to travel from
Sorry,
here,
wait for the mic, please.
if you were to travel from here to the starting point of the river, what would the route be? How long would it take? And how would you begin your trip?
I mean, to get back to the source of the Selenga? You can fly from here to either Frankfurt, Beijing, Tokyo, or Seoul, and then on to Ulaanbaatar. And then it's another short flight, an hour and a half, to a town called Morin. And then you would drive for about 10 hours over a dirt road in a four-wheel drive vehicle. And then 10 hours on the back of a horse. And then the last 3 hours climbing over a field of rock and scree to the peak where the river begins.
Yeah, that'll keep the tourist numbers down. Someone else? Yes, sir.
What is it that you wish for the lake and the rivers, in 50 years, 100 years? Would it look the same as what you just described to arrive there? What do you envision?
I don't know if it would look the same because, of course, these are natural landscapes and they would be evolving, and the climate, as the climate is changing, of course, these places will also change. That's sort of out of our, that part of its adaptation is out of our hands. But what I would like is that we don't just say, okay, the best way to save this is to leave it alone, or the best way to save this is to make sure that humans don't impact it, because that's not possible. Humans have lived there for thousands of years, but until recently, they hadn't screwed it up. So it's very possible for us to do that again. I mean, it's well within our capabilities. We can love that place, and if we do love that place, it will love us back. So that's my wish for it.
Hi, I'd love to hear more about the sense of reverence you mentioned when you were talking about the river being like a god to you. What is it like to experience that?
I don't know. I try to explain this to some of my friends who are also fishing guides, and sometimes I can feel like I know I can't see the fish, but I somehow know what they're doing down there, and I can just explain to someone they should get ready because something's about to happen, and the question is always, well, how do you know? And the only thing I can say is I can feel a disturbance in the force. I feel something, and sometimes I even smell it. But so I don't know like where that deep connection to that place comes to, because obviously, I was born in Nassau County Community Hospital. I might have some. I mean, they say 17% of Asian men have some Chinggis DNA in them, but I don't know where that comes from. But I mean, do you have a place where you feel that way?
Sadly, not yet. Hopefully.
Someone else?
When you took your initial trip to that area, you were obviously expecting it to be a certain way, and then it was the way it actually was. How big was the difference between what you expected versus what you actually found when you got there?
Yeah, that was huge, because I was expecting, I mean, we had spent at that point about 15 years in western Montana, another place that I really love. And then we were working in Shanghai, China. We went from the Paradise Valley just north of Yellowstone to one of the biggest, most polluted cities in the world, 20 million people. And so I had the opposite of cabin fever. If you can have cabin fever in the city, that's what I had. So when I was going to Mongolia, I thought, oh, it's going to be like Montana, fresh air, blue sky, rivers with fish you can catch on a fly rod. But when I got there, a lot of people say that Mongolia is like Montana without the fences, but it's much more than that. I mean, not only are there no fences, there's no interstate, there's no strip malls, there's no vacation homes, and the culture is different. And it's not that I want to disown or run away from American culture, but there's something very attractive about Mongolian culture.
So did you learn a lot of different languages in your travel? So you
I am
communicate?
terrible at languages. I take lessons and I learn enough to get by, and then when I leave that place, I forget completely. Actually, even, I leave Mongolia in mid-October, and I usually go back there in the beginning of June, and a lot of times I've forgotten even, how to ask what day it is when I get there.
It's amazing you keep your job, Peter.
I'm very fortunate. Yeah.
You are. You're a lucky man. Or is that it? Maybe our work here is done? If so, join me again in thanking Peter Fong. As you saw, there's some books out front. Peter will inscribe them, and you'll inscribe my copy of Moby Dick, right? Just right there.
Melville,
and the
yeah.
bar will be open. So thank you all so much.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Peter.
That was good.